Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by our friends from the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by the AC Airport. Plan your summer vacation now. Spirit Airlines is offering nonstop flights from Atlantic City International Airport to Boston, Atlanta, San Juan, Miami, and other exciting destinations. Visit spirit.com to book right now. Adam Caplan is here from InsideTheBirds.com and the latest Inside the Birds podcast, which dropped yesterday. You can check that out on the Inside the Birds platforms and wherever you get your podcasts. And he joins me now on a day where John Gannon met the media, and I thought Adam had some pretty interesting things to say. So let's dive into some of those. How are you, friend?
Good to talk to you. Yeah, it was good to see Gannon talk, or to hear Gannon talk.
He seemed a lot more confident. Speaking today, he seemed like he had much more confidence when he spoke. He was very reserved and quiet last year.
Mike, it's funny you say that because it's almost like he had a chip on his shoulder. Like maybe he's aware of some things people said and didn't say and were critical, whatever the case may be. He wasn't defiant. He seemed a little bit different. Confidence, whatever you want to call it. I thought it was very interesting. Yeah, I definitely thought he either the PR staff prepped him or someone got in his ear over the last 6 to 9 months. Said, hey, man, you just need to come out here a little bit stronger. And he was ready for it. Look, in the media, it wasn't like the media didn't know that he was going to talk eventually, and they did today. And we'll learn more about his plans when we get a little bit of access before training camp starts. But, yeah, it was definitely good to hear him and see him speak.
Yeah, so there was a lot of things in here that I want to get your opinion on. But one that really stood out to me was a question from our friend Les Bowen. And he said, with the additions in the offseason, is it fair to say that fans will see more of what you want to do rather than what you had to do to make up for some of the things that weren't what you wanted? And he kind of pushed back on that as if like, no, I'm not going to do things differently because we have pieces that I now want. We just didn't execute them as well last year. I thought his answer would have been a little different when asked, hey, are you going to get to do things now more the way you want to?
Right, because he doesn't want to blame the front office, and that's admirable. I get it. But let's face it, they other than Darius Slay, they really struggled at corner. We know why Steven Nelson isn't back here. He just wasn't good enough. He had a good contract though with the Texans, but the Eagles were looking to upgrade at corner. They sure did. No question about that with Bradbury. Now he also was asked Gannon about man versus zone. He thinks he's versatile. There's some truth to it, but everybody knows who follows the NFL, and particularly this situation, Bradbury's way more comfortable in zone coverage. That's just a fact. Now the question would be, and I know he's not going to give you a lot because he doesn't want to give it away. Other teams could hear all this, see it all. But what's going to be different? And Les's question was fair. But again, he's not going to give it up. But what he did, I think Martin Frank asked us about the scheme. And Gannon's response was it's a matchup-driven league. Well, what Gannon didn't say, but we all know, now if you have a guy like Bradbury, you now can match up. If you want to play man, you can match up. If you can play matchup zone, you can do that. They play what they wanted to play. They did some of this. We put this out last summer that the Eagles wanted to play mirror match coverage, and they didn't do a lot of it early on. They did it later. Now that you get a James Bradbury, there's some things you can do that you were not able to do last year. That's an absolute fact. I think we all know that.
Yeah. Now, he was asked about all the cornerbacks in the room. What's the reason? They went out and got another one yesterday, by the way, James Moreland, a guy who's had some starting experience, by the way, more of a slot guy. Why all the cornerbacks in the room? What's the plan with all these guys? And then, followed up with James Bradbury, what made him an intriguing addition here? So that cornerback question was at the forefront of this conversation with Gannon.
Yeah, and look, he's not going to – he discussed it, and he talks about that it's a matchup-driven league, and it obviously he was talking about there's so many jerseys that they have now. Well, yeah, they have more of them. That's the point, and they're going to learn as they get Bradbury into their offseason program. And then really in training camp, that's when you really could do things because you're so limited – to what you can do in the offseason because of contact. You can't really have any contact. So they'll be able to, this is a learning phase, and then the real competition, and it gets heated up when you could do more. You're allowed to do more in training camp. But these next 2 weeks before they're off for the summer, remember, the Eagles are essentially one of the first teams, if not the first team, to be off for the summer. They were the first team last year because of their agreement that Sirianni had with the players. So these next couple of weeks here, Mike, are going to be huge for the learning process with all of the new players, and not just Bradbury. It's the draft picks. It's Jordan Davis. He was asked about Jordan Davis, and I'm fascinated to see how they're going to use Jordan Davis. He seemed to indicate. I don't even know. I'm not sure what he meant about it, getting ability to rush the passer. I'm not sure about that, but he definitely talked about his ability to play what's different from college to the pro level.
Yeah, he mentioned, about how Jordan Davis is a big, violent guy. He talked about Nakobe Dean, about how getting him was a little bit of a surprise for them where they ended up getting him. So when he mentioned those guys, but those are two guys that would allow you to kind of change your fronts, having Jordan Davis. And he kind of indicated, did you get the indication that, yes, we're going to see more changes in the fronts? We're going to see more three front looks, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's no question. I know he's not going to give it up, but we all know there are going to be multiple. We've talked about that on Inside the Birds repeatedly after the draft when they got Jordan Davis. Because Jordan Davis, Mike, even if he only plays 25 snaps a game, on those 25 snaps, it gives you the ability to be multiple because he could be a nose tackle. You could play him at 5 technique in a 34 front if you want to because he's long. Don't forget how tall he is and how long he is. And he's such an athlete. I know Gannon does not want to criticize the roster that he had last season. I get it. But to think like they can't do way more than they did last year is ridiculous. Of course they can because they have better talent.
They sure do. And, that has been something I know one of the things we'll probably talk about a little bit later on in the week is, the tiers of where these teams are. And a lot of people where they're trying to put the Eagles at is because they've added so much talent, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, which means Gannon is going to have a lot of new pieces to work with here. He's got so many new faces with Reddick and then getting Brandon Graham back. That was another question about getting Graham back, how big that is for them. They now have Bradbury. But one area where they didn't get a lot of new faces is safety. How did you what was your reaction to the way he answered the safety question? Any tea leaves there?
No, not really. I mean, he was asked about Marcus Epps, who I'm a big fan of, just based on what we had seen and on our pregame show on Inside the Birds. Greg Cosell and Jason Avant talked about him. I know in Q&A they've talked about him with Quentin Michael and Jason. So yeah, he talked about the consistency because this is the thing that what made Marcus Epps stand out. Whenever they asked him to play, very few mental errors. He's a better athlete than you think. And I don't think Gannon was really – because the question was asked by Reuben Frank about being a part-time to full-time player. Because what Gannon doesn't know, maybe he knows that he's not saying, but I'm not ruling it. The way this offseason has gone, and the Eagles have been so aggressive after a slow start, Mike, because you and I talked about this on your show, gosh, why aren't they doing anything? And as we always say on Inside the Birds, we've learned this the hard way, they don't line up till September. The team knows that they need to do something. They're going to do it. Now, we didn't know about the A.J. Brown thing until it actually happened. It didn't get out until the draft. It actually happened during the draft. But just the Nakobe Dean, Kaiser White went to your school. The getting the corner, obviously Bradbury, formerly the Giants, who was the best free agent corner out there by far. All the moves that they've made on defense, we haven't talked about offense because this is about Gannon. They're going to be better. Like, we all know that. But how much better remains to be seen. And Epps, by the way, is probably better than most people understand. And I'm hoping that they don't. I just hope they give him a shot to be that guy. Now, of course, if they got involved with a free agency, there's some decent free agent safeties out there, Mike, to be honest here. But Marcus Epps is just as good as most of these guys.
Adam Caplan from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. Football at 4. John Gannon spoke today as OTA's getting underway here. And Jeff Mosher, your partner over there at Inside the Birds, asked about the pass rush. And you got 7, 8 guys, how they intend to use those guys. How do we anticipate, like Brandon Graham, is he going to be a full-time guy? Josh Sweat, how do you think they end up using the amount, and there's a lot of guys who do different things. Reddick, how does he mix in? How do you see this 6, 7, 8 guys? Derek Barnett's another one, all working out.
You know what's funny? If you look at the transcript, I did not see. I listened to almost the entire thing.
Yep.
And I heard Jeff's question. In fact, I heard 2 of them. They did not show up in the transcript. Actually, no, I see it. I see it now. Okay, see, Jeff's name is to the far right. Okay, see the way that they line these questions up. You see because Jeff's question was twofold. It talks about the 7 or 8 deep. I see where his name is. Okay, I found it. Yeah, he said that the thing that he responded to is the more pass rushers, the better. And there's obviously truth to that because that helps you have better depth. Remember the rotation they had at 17, Mike? That was the secret sauce to Jim Schwartz's scheme in 17, is to have Chris Long coming off the bench, to have multiple rotations, to have Brandon Graham playing inside a nickel, to have Vinny Curry come in nickel, to rotate guys. And if someone got hurt, to have one guy step in. They didn't have that last year because they just didn't have the depth. Now They have it. And that, though he didn't really answer Jeff's question very deep, he just said, hey, the more the merrier, and the more, as he said, to affect the quarterback.
Yeah, and Keith, I guess we would both agree that with Brandon Graham out, that Josh Sweat was clearly the best pass rusher they had, and he's an inexperienced guy that you didn't know what really you were going to have. When Graham went out, for him to be the main guy, you're kind of going in with a guy that you don't know that much about, how much production you're going to get for him. You have a little better idea now. You wonder now what they think of him. Does he go to the top of the depth chart?
Right, and he did say in Gannon's, though he didn't want to give it up what they're going to do, and I understand that. He says, we'll figure it out. His quote was, we'll figure that out as we get closer to game day, and then on game day how we deploy those guys. Well, we know that. Once they have 4 guys that they like, if they play 43, because we think they're going to be multiple, every indication we've gotten this offseason would explain that. Now you add Jordan Davis, he should be multiple. But how they do it, do they go 4-3, 3-4? Are they junking 5-2? We don't know any of this yet. The percentage that they do each front, we're not going to know. Like he of course he knows because he's not going to give that out. Now it's funny. We saw a bunch of things last summer in training camp. They did some of it. Some of it they didn't do because, Mike, quite frankly, I don't think they had enough talent on defense. Now they sure do, and there's no excuse.
Well, on this conversation, Jeff asked about the pass rushers. What do they do with Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis?
Yeah.
Are they only playing one of those guys at a time, 2 of those guys at a time? How do they get all 4 those guys in as going to a rotation? How do you see those 4 guys getting enough snaps? Right,
it's funny because he was asked by Ed Kratz about Milton Williams and about Dean, and look, he talked about Kyron Johnson, who was a 6th-round pick. And just all the group of players that they got in this offseason. The question will be going forward, depending on what front, because here's the thing that is going to happen. They didn't do enough scheme versatility last year because I don't think, number one, they didn't have the players. Plus, it was Gannon's first year. And I don't think he was just comfortable enough to do it. But because they've added the 2 linebackers, Jordan Davis as well, who's going to have to play as a first-round pick, Jacoby Dean, Kaiser White, and other players. And now you've got Milton Williams, who's got scheme versatility. Now you can do more stuff. And you could throw change-ups. They're going to do things they didn't show last year, Mike, that none of us saw. And when they come out week 1 against Detroit, who got absolutely manhandled by the Eagles, Detroit's not going to know this stuff because they're not going to show it. They'll show it in training camp, but they don't get access to that tape.
Right.
So unless we reporters talk about, oh, yeah, boy, the Eagles ran a lot of 34 in today's practice, there's no way they're going to know about that.
Yeah, it's because you're mentioning that for the listener, they open up with Detroit. So Detroit will not have really an idea of what they will look like. Much like last year, they caught Atlanta completely off guard early in the season and, rolled them in the first week of the season. They didn't know what to expect from Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia. Now, you're not going to know what to expect from John Gannon's defense. That's what you're kind of referring to.
Right. But again, they've got versatility. He talks about Epps. He was asked about Epps a bunch of things. And one of the things that Gannon talked about is just one snap at a time, being consistent. That is why he got on the field as much as he did and he did well on what they asked him to do, and that's why right now, I unless they make a trade for safety, which is, I mean, you could say never. Their confidence in Epps is pretty high from what we understand. Now, the question with Epps is, and Gannon was not asked about this, do you see him as a 75% snap guy, 50%? That we don't know yet. I would assume if he's going to start, he's going to be 75 to, if not more than that. Because quite frankly, who's the third safety now? Is Wallace really ready for that?
Right.
He hasn't shown that.
No, and you kind of hinted at this earlier, going back to Jordan Davis, that they kind of hinted that he could be a pass rusher. John Gannon was asked, what are you going to ask him to do? He said a lot of the same things, but is that something that people think that he could develop into a pass rusher, a guy who could get up the field and get to the quarterback at this level? Because he didn't play a lot of snaps in college.
Right, Mike. Right, Mike. Down the road, see, he was not doing that in college. And that's the question, because remember now, he didn't talk about it in this press conference, but they've they've kind of reassigned the coaches' rooms. They've kind of redefined it. This coach will do this guy will do that. So that's the big question going forward is what can they get out of Jordan Davis as a pass rusher?
Yeah.
And he seemed to be a little bit more bullish than the reality, because the word around the league was prior to the draft, the one knock on Jordan Davis was he just didn't show enough as a pass rusher. I know he played limited snaps.
Yeah.
But in those limited snaps, though he had violent hands and he's long, show us the great pass rush moves that we didn't see.
Right, because a lot of people are making it out, well, they had a lot of blowouts, and Georgia needs to get these guys on the bench so they don't transfer into games. That was kind of the way that it's been, why he doesn't play a lot of the snaps. Real quick, we're going to move it to, I want to get some front office thoughts where Andy Weidel is, but what is with this international home like, why are they making this? Why can't people just market wherever they want to market? I can't be the Eagles and go to Australia and put my I don't get that.
Understand this, though. The NFL wants to be like Major League Baseball, be truly international. We know the Jaguars for years and will continue to do this to play a game in England. With the league, I remember when I worked for ESPN, I had a very strong league source tell me before our lifetime. He said in the next 15 to 20 years, and he said before our lifetime is over here, he goes, we're going to be playing. We're actually going to have a team overseas. I'm like, that's not going to happen. No way. This guy would know, because I'm telling you, we're going to have a team over there. And we didn't go into the logistics. He said someday they're going to figure it out and make money over there. And look, having teams have marketing rights regionally, overseas, sure.
Yeah.
Look, it's all about being international.
Well, I don't know why they just wouldn't say, go do what you want, instead of saying, okay, you're allowed to go to,
right.
Well,
because the league wants to have control over what their teams individually do. Because you can't just go ahead, do whatever you want.
Right.
They want to have control over it. The league has to have control, but they made all these announcements this week, but there's not a lot of detail. I'm interested to see what these rights are. Okay, well, you're going to go, you've got Australia. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, we don't know what that means. Like marketing rights. Now, television rights, retail, we just don't know what that means yet.
Because you have 17 games now, Adam. I threw out the idea of each team gets 8 home, 8 road, and 1 neutral site international game. Maybe that's how they kind of, so that everybody gets 8 and 8, and then that 17th game is an international game.
Well, but the problem is they only want to have it where the facilities are great. This is another talk that just with the league over the years, they're real big on minimizing issues, because remember the field for years, players were slipping, the clubs would complain about that. Great stadiums for fans. There are a lot of reasons why they don't go to certain countries, because they don't feel like the facilities are good enough. So if you want to have a game like one of your, like the Jaguars might, the Jaguars love having it, whether it's in Wembley or whatever. Their response, as I understand, has been pretty good. But you have to be careful of not go. You got to go to the right countries where everything is going to be set up right.
All right. What's the latest with Andy Weidel and the Eagles front office situation, which seems very fluid by the days almost?
Yeah. So Mosher and I are pretty good authority that it's going to happen this week. what we reported first on Inside the Birds. What is today? Tuesday.
Yep.
On our Monday show, we dropped it. Another way to get Andy Weidel in there if he doesn't get the GM job is to be the assistant GM with Omar Khan, who's got a very good chance he does their contracts. If Omar Khan's the GM, do not be shocked if Andy Weidel becomes his assistant GM. We're not saying it's definitely happening, to be clear here. But what we're told by multiple league sources is, Mike, we put this out yesterday, it's definitely in the consideration if Andy doesn't get the GM job and Omar gets it, because the Steelers are going to set Omar up with a football guy, and Andy's a darn good football guy. And plus, he started his career with the Steelers. They know him. He's from Pittsburgh. And what we're also told is Khan and Andy Weidel know each other a little bit. So we'll see what happens. But John Spytek also interviewed a former Eagles exec who's Jason Light's right-hand man with the Bucs.
Right, Adam Caplan, InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast. The latest one is out. It dropped yesterday morning. You can check that out to get all the insight on the Eagles offseason. John Gannon today spoke. Good stuff. Adam Caplan, he'll be back on Friday's edition of Football at 4.
One more thing. Q&A drops tomorrow. Jeff said that heavy scheme-based show. They're going to break down not only tomorrow's show at 6 a.m. Eastern on every platform, YouTube and pod. They're breaking down the Eagles' offensive defensive schemes going forward. So listen to that. I cannot wait for that.
And that is Quentin Michael and Jason Avant Q&A show tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. on the Inside the Birds platforms. All right, pal. I'll talk to you Friday.
Thanks, man.